Hi, everyone. Thanks to everyone for coming. Thank you to Luis as well for that introduction. It's been really great working with Luis and with Pillar and SDG Cities on this. We're here today to talk about the intersectionality between climate change and social issues, specifically in an urban context, and what this means for social purpose organizations.
So we're just going to start off with a land acknowledgement. We're located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenapehoik, and Arawandurang nations, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. We also want to just recognize that all of our entire report is from a Western Settlers perspective, and it's in more of an urban context, and so we didn't really focus on Indigenous peoples, but we recognize that there are a lot of socio-environmental issues that they are also dealing with.
Thank you. So just to give some context, this presentation is based on a report that we did as part of the Western Master of Environment and Sustainability program. So through that, we had a consulting course and started to work with Luis on a report about the social impacts of climate change. So just to give some context about kind of how this came about. And I believe that report will be made available to everyone as well. But just to introduce ourselves, my name is Rito. I have a Bachelor of International Development and Globalization with a minor in Feminist and Gender Studies, and I'm currently working with Canada's Clean 50 to recognize some leaders in sustainability.
I'm Thurka. My undergrad was in ecology, conservation biology, and environmental health, and I'm currently working with Brock University as a sustainability coordinator.
And my name is Preet. I have an honors specialization in biology from Western University, and I'm currently working at Western as a sustainability coordinator. So just a brief overview of the agenda for today. First, we'll be going through just basically what our report entails, so intersectionality of climate change and the social issues, a few case studies that we looked at, recommended actions, and then we have a small activity for everyone here today.
And we're going to start with a Mentimeter. So if everyone could try to scan that code. I know it's a little small, or you can just go to menti.com and enter that code right there. And I'm just going to pull up the Menti website in the meantime. All right. So whenever you're ready and you're in the Mentimeter room, I guess, if you could just answer the question, what social issues are impacted by climate change? So what social issues that you know or have seen been impacted by climate change already? Homelessness, food security for sure. Anyone else? Are we good? Alrighty. Come on in if you're. Hi. Housing, health, homelessness, food security for sure. Those are all topics that we've identified as well as really being impacted by climate change already. So we'll just go back to our presentation. Oh my God, okay.
All right, so just to start us off, looking at the intersectionality of climate change and social issues. So in our report, we looked at 6 different types of social issues. The first one being poverty, so seeing how climate change can affect marginalized or low-income communities and how they may be disproportionately affected by climate change, whether that's through their finances, the services that they have access to. We also looked at racial inequalities. So racialized communities are also disproportionately affected by climate change, again with the same sort of issues that people experiencing poverty may face as well. How food access is impacted by climate change. So types of social purpose organizations include food banks or farmers as well. So this isn't only in a Canadian context, but also for global food production and the pressure for vulnerable areas that may be impacted by climate change. And they can also experience something called food shocks, which comes from weakened soil health, lack in pollination, or the need for herbicides. looking at how mental health can be impacted by climate change. So increase in mental illnesses of individuals who are affected by extreme weather events, whether that be PTSD or something that's new that's called eco-anxiety. So just having anxiety about how climate change impacts social, environmental, and government systems. Looking at environmental pollution and how the air pollution, wildfires, or waterborne illnesses may infect health for people, and how that may impact social purpose organizations and what they provide. And lastly, we looked at migrants, specifically climate migrants. So these are individuals who move from their current location or the origin due to climate change impacting their area, and seeing how social purpose organizations that support migrants may have to change their programming due to climate change. So also in our report, we looked at how the different types of SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, are impacted with these social issues. In our report and the social issues that we identified 9 out of the 17 SDGs. I won't go through all of them right now, but some of the main ones that kind of stand out would be SDG number 2, which is zero hunger, and that one correlates with food access and climate change. So the varying weather events that we do experience and how that impacts food production availability to communities. Another one would be SDG number 6, which is clean water and sanitation, and ensuring clean access to clean and sanitary water, as well as illness-free water, and that impacts environmental health and pollution and climate change. Next. So we have another 4 set of SDGs that are addressed. Again, I won't go through all of them, but for one being SDG number 11, sustainable cities and communities. So recognizing the risk that people face as a result of climate change and reducing those barriers. So this can be addressed for poverty and climate change, as well as the racial inequalities of climate change. And SDG number 13, which is climate action, and that one kind of addresses all the different social issues, but specifically changing the lack of health and environmental well-being for people in general. We also looked at the impact of climate change on social purpose organization and how social purpose organizations operate. So this can be either adapting their programming, so having to adapt to the different needs of their client base, and maybe the frequency at which their clients are using their services, and also reevaluating which content they're providing, the budget for their programs, and also how they're delivering their content to their client base. They may also face an increase in programming, again, because of an increased client base. And that also means having more employees for the organization and different maybe organizations collaborating with each other. And the last thing that they may want to do is mitigate the effects before climate change really does impact the organization. So delivering their program in a different way or presenting it differently. An example of this would be for agricultural practices. To mitigate the effects of maybe food loss or food insecurity, they may start to look towards more climate-resistant crops, or using less herbicides, or something in their operations.
All right, so next we're going to look at 5 different case study organizations from around Canada. Some of them are national level, some of them are more local, and we're going to see what they've done to respond to climate action and how they incorporate climate action into their programming, just to give you guys some ideas of what your organization can do. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Archway Community Services. This one is based in British Columbia. And what they essentially did was, in response to floods or major extreme weather events, they were called first to provide food to people that were isolated by the flooding. And then they realized that they can kind of do more. So what they did was they also helped evacuate people that were isolated and provide emergency relief shelters and stuff like that. Especially now here where we're starting to see like wildfires and stuff like that, where we normally don't. It's important that organizations can respond quickly, because organizations here aren't really used to responding to events like wildfires or major flooding and stuff like that. So being able to kind of do what Archway had to do, where you can turn your organization or building into a cooling shelter, a heating shelter, provide food, water, phone charging stations, stuff like that. And then the SEED, our next case study, is based in Guelph, Ontario. They focus on food insecurity, and their kind of overall goal is to kind of create a circular food system that's driven by the community. One of the initiatives that they do is with the University of Guelph. They have the Upcycle Kitchen. So any foods that were deemed like damaged or unfit for grocery stores, they would take and turn it into meals or other foods. For example, they got damaged tomatoes and turn it into ketchup, and then would sell it as like at a pay-what-you-can rate to support accessibility to everyone. They also work with Second Harvest, where they get food that's unfit for grocery stores, and then they redistribute it to food banks and school programs. The next organization, Faith in the Common Good, is a interfaith network that's across Canada, and what their main goal is to kind of teach faith communities or spiritual communities how they can be more climate supportive, or how they can take climate action. And one of the big things that they do is the greening sacred spaces. So they help organizations make their buildings more energy efficient, more green, whether it's adding like a rain garden or green roofs, blue roofs, stuff like that. Greenway Chaplain Community Center is more in their initial stages of incorporating climate action into their programming. They mainly focus on social issues. One of the things that they're starting to do now is provide initiatives to the youth of micro forest planting, community gardens, community cleanups, and stuff like that. And finally, ALIS, which was formerly an acronym for Alternative Land Use Services. What they do is they are more for farmers, especially because a lot of farmers don't really relate to urban climate change issues and a lot of the initiatives that the government will focus on, because they're usually more for the urban areas. So ALIS tries to bridge rural and urban areas, as well as helping farmers make the most out of the land that they have. So any unproductive land that they have, they will help farmers turn it into green infrastructure or green space, because that not only helps well-being, but also it can support biodiversity, water flow, stuff like that. And then they also help farmers naturalize their land. So land that was damaged by the weather or anything like that, they help rehabilitate it, whether they use, and then they can use it again for farming or just healthy green space.
Thank you. All right, does anybody have any questions so far? We'll also do some questions at the end, but if anyone has anything burning at this point.
All right, perfect. So I guess we'll hop into recommendations for social purpose organizations.
So this kind of has two parts. It's what can your organization itself do in order to kind of stay afloat as climate change becomes even more of a threat than it is right now? And then also, how can your organization strengthen communities so that they are better served and have the best tools to deal with all the challenges that they're facing? I do want to do another Mentimeter question asking what the organization you're at is doing right now. So let me just bring that up. Okay, yeah, so if your organization is doing anything in regards to climate change, whether it's if your organization has a green team, or even if you guys just talk about it sometimes, let us know, and then we'd be curious to see. Got a climate change committee, that's great.
Also, if your organization's not doing anything yet, that's also fine. You can say that, or like you're working towards it, or you want your organization to start doing climate action.
Yeah. Green team, that's great. Community investment, bike-friendly workplace, helping businesses secure funding to implement green initiatives. Yeah, that's awesome. There's a bunch of funding available for businesses, organizations, different things to implement different green initiatives, and we included a lot of those sources in our report, so that will be made available to you as well. Supporting green commuting, supporting local agencies driving climate action, calculating finance emissions, that's great. So looking at your scope 1 and 2 emissions, operational emissions, bike-friendly business again, looking at how to recycle PPE during COVID, that's great. And then climate transition and DEI. Great. Green audit.
These are all awesome. This is really great to see. I know kind of everyone's trending towards like becoming more green, so it's really good to see all these initiatives that are taking place right here in London. All right. Sorry, it's so awkward to go and present. All right. Okay. So one of the things we looked at in our report was the power of advocacy. So your organization really has the power to advocate towards a just transition. That essentially means that Canada is already in the steps of transitioning towards a net zero economy, and advocating for just transition means that no one will be left behind, and all the social issues will also be included as we kind of shift the way that our economy works. And then as well, if your organization's traditionally only just done kind of more social advocacy, we now know how the environment and social issues are linked. So advocating for the environmental issues as well is also going to help those social issues. So some advocacy areas to support include Indigenous environmental activism, stewardship, and self-determination. Obviously, this is super important as reconciliation, and as well because Indigenous peoples are seen as the traditional and contemporary stewards of the land as well. Also important to support public transportation and green spaces in low-income areas. Traditionally, because of structural inequalities, these are both lacking in low-income areas, and public transportation and more green space is going to build access, it's going to lower emissions, and it's going to build climate resilience in low-income areas. Also supporting bike lane networks as well is a great way to reduce emissions, but also increase access to different parts of the city and promote well-being. Same concept as well with 15-minute cities, which is the concept that everything that someone needs should be within kind of a 15-minute walk or bike. Again, really increasing access to services so people maybe can't afford a car or don't have a lot of time can get everywhere they need, while also not producing any emissions. Dense affordable housing as well, because everyone has a right to housing, but when it's dense, that decreases urban sprawl. Circular food systems as well, so just trying to feed people in a way where there's less emissions and less waste, and also supporting the climate migrant activism, kind of like we talked about already. The Climate Action Network is a really great resource as kind of a place to start with that. So advocacy will look different depending on your organization, your capacity, kind of your goal and your mission, but it could look like organizing petitions or peaceful protests, speaking at council meetings, or just speaking with your local council representatives, and then also looking at what other organizations are doing, whether if it's in the area or kind of on a global scale. There's some great Canada-wide advocacy organizations to support, such as Fridays for Future or Acorn Housing, and we have a list of those as well for you guys. Another thing that your organization can look at is climate mitigation. So this is reducing your organization's own environmental impact, kind of helping that two-way relationship between communities and the environment, because we know that the healthier environment means healthier people as well. And then this is also a great way to decrease costs for your organization in the long run, because as we know, with climate change, budgets could become more strained. There are a lot of funding opportunities available through grants or other sources to implement different environmental initiatives, such as making your buildings more green and energy efficient, and then this will also decrease your operating costs in the long run. So your green energy efficient buildings could look like installing insulated windows, bird-friendly windows, energy efficient appliances, renewable energy if you have that capacity. And the Project Neutral is a free website and app. I believe they have an app as well, where you can calculate your organization's footprint, and it kind of gives you a plan and a place to start. It could also look like looking at your procurement, so making sure everything you buy isn't single use, it's reusable, it's recyclable, it's compostable. I know most people are probably already doing that, but it's good to keep in mind. And then as well, like educating the community about their own environmental footprints. And then kind of on the flip side of mitigation is climate change adaptation. So preparing for climate events so that their impacts are lessened when they occur. So this kind of starts with creating a vulnerability assessment to determine what impacts will look like both on your organization and on the community. So there's a wealth of knowledge in London that could help with this. I I'm pretty sure there's people at the Western University who are available to help with that. And then London also has a vulnerability assessment and CCA plan already in place. So you could look at the municipal one and kind of adapt to your organization. And yeah, after the vulnerability assessment, create a plan that fits your organization and the people that you serve. And it's really important to also share this plan and your goals that come with it, just to kind of educate the public and then also kind of hold your organization accountable. Your climate adaptation plan could look like planning to provide heating or cooling centers when different weather events occur. It could be just like what Thurka was talking about, providing different resources in the event of wildfires or floods. So, for example, when the air quality is really bad, maybe not only a heating and cooling center, but also you're a clean air center, and people can come to your building because you have air purifiers, kind of thing. And then also supporting and implementing green infrastructure. So there are different technologies, I guess, like rain gardens, rain barrels, green and blue roofs, and permeable paving that will help decrease the amount of flooding that can occur in a city. And as well, just planting trees are all good ways to kind of create that climate resilience against the impacts of different climate events. Our research also found that collaboration is super important when you're looking at kind of combating climate change. So Pillar is a great kind of place to start as a nonprofit network. And then also right here in London, there's Green Economy London and the London Environmental Network. Alex is here from your Green Economy London, right? So feel free to talk to Alex about what they do as well. Kind of on the flip side of that is like looking internally at your organization. So climate change should really be embedded in every single planning aspect. So instead of an afterthought, it's at the forefront of every planning discussion. Something that can really help kind of get everyone in that mindset is having a green team at your organization. And I know a few of you already do, so that's great. And then setting targets for where you want to be with your climate planning that are science-based and kind of really specific so that you can track them. You should also expect your operating costs to change as food scarcity becomes a thing. Food may get more expensive if you provide food to the community. Power costs may go up, things like that. And that's just something to keep in mind when you're planning. I know being a social purpose organization, you seek funding sources from probably a lot of grants that are related to social issues. But if you start to tackle the environmental issues as well, there'll be way more funding available to you. So if you can show all these sources that you're taking the environment, taking climate into consideration, there'll be more money available to you potentially. And we have a list of those resources as well. And then we've also looked at how BIPOC community members are specifically affected by climate change as well, and how everyone's mental health is affected. So it's really important to create safe spaces in your organization, maybe offering more counseling services, offering maybe more programming in different languages as we expect more climate migrants, and really creating opportunities for BIPOC community members so that they're really supported. As well, if your organization has the capacity, they can support circular food systems. So right here in London, Urban Roots is a great organization that kind of is really looking at combating hunger. Supporting a food system could look like using food rescue services. So there are a bunch of apps that tell you when you can get kind of food at a discounted rate that would otherwise be thrown out. Starting a community garden maybe, and then buying seasonal and buying local is a great way to reduce costs and also emissions from the food that you're getting. And also meatless meals are a way to reduce costs as well. A sustainable transportation plan could look like subsidizing public transit use for your community members and for your staff, providing bike parking, facilitating car shares, and encouraging active transportation as well. So maybe different like bike to work initiatives. As well, there's a federal incentive to transition to electric vehicles. So if your organization has a fleet of cars, there is funding available to maybe make that transition eventually to an electric vehicle. And then there's also more federal funding for e-bikes if your organization has a need for e-bikes as well. So we have an activity for you guys. Preet's going to introduce it, so I'll give her the mic.
Yeah, so the activity that we have is in your own groups. You can pick an organization, so whichever organization a pair or a member of your group represent. Think of a service that your organization provides and how it may be impacted by climate change, and come up with a strategy that mitigates the effects of climate change, or maybe there's something that your organization already does that you do want to share with the group, and you can also share that with us. So I believe maybe groups of 2 or 3 would be good.
Maybe like, yeah, just at your table already. And then if you're alone at your table, join someone else. And I think we'll give you guys like 15 minutes. So we'll come back at 4:15.